too. On March 17th, during our regular call, we have a guest speaker coming on. Jim, you're familiar with him, Alex Weber.
Oh, awesome.
Alex Weber is going to be on here with the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate on March 17th. So don't miss that call. Alex Weber, if you look him up, he did what's it, the American Ninja Warrior. Are you familiar with that? So he was actually the newscaster, you know, the person who would just talk about all of it, and then they talked him into actually competing in it. And so he has actually won American Ninja Warrior. He was lacrosse coach of the year, done a lot of incredible things. And yeah, you want to talk about pushing yourself hard and just starting from nothing, you know, or from, you know, some sort of health. Obviously, he was in athletics and stuff, but he set a goal and went all the way to the top. So yeah,
Yeah.
look him up, Alex Weber. He'll be with us on March 17th.
Awesome, Rod. I love that. Good
Yeah.
job. And by the way, Alex is also a world-renowned speaker. He does speaking tour around the country and other places in the world. So that'd be great. Good insights.
Yeah.
Uh,
His book, he also is an author. It's called Fail Proof. I don't think we have that one on our
uh,
back end yet.
we do. I got it behind me. And
Okay. I don't know if it's on the back end of the site, but Fail Proof. So an incredible story, incredible young man. So if you have got any training advice that you want, that'd be the time to bring your questions.
yeah, good call. So I want to transition into a little bit of something that just occurred to me with seeing your face on the call, Jim. And this relates to entrepreneurs and the decisions that we make along the way as entrepreneurs, you know, working for somebody else. I think in the society that we live in now, especially with social media and all the things that we have access to, I think it appears to be really attractive to be an entrepreneur, right? And make money and do all these things, which of course that's what it looks like online. Most of the time, it's not really that. You know, they've embellished a little bit some of the successes, I'm sure, online. But at the same time, what they also don't show is the day in, day out grind to find that success within being an entrepreneur. And so, what I want to use is a little bit of this time to serve as a reminder that sometimes our complete happiness comes from being an entrepreneur aligned with our why and what our own personal goals are. And Jim, the reason why this simulated some thoughts when I saw your face is that I have a client that you introduced me to over a year ago. And this individual was thinking that they wanted to be an entrepreneur and leave the corporate sector and do their own thing, right? A book, public speaking, consulting, stuff like that, right? And which are all great avenues to go down. I check those boxes. Rod checked some of those boxes, and it seems like a natural progression from where their career is. However, once we work through the why, okay, and let this serve as a big reminder. What is your why, and what is your we can call it your personal exit strategy from working down the road. And so Jim, you brought up you've got a lot of sports going on right now. 'Tis the season, right? I imagine that plays a pretty important role in your life, and I also imagine that the success in your career as an entrepreneur for a big company, especially as we've watched you elevate in your statuses throughout the companies that you've worked with, that you're probably in a pretty good spot to enjoy a combination of both. And oftentimes we go searching for something that may not be a home run for our whys. And so what I saw with my client, within the first quarter of working together, this person realized, hey, you know what? I can make some money outside of my corporate job. And they did. But I'm realizing that if I put some guardrails on my professional career, guardrails that weren't there previously, guardrails that aren't part of the expectations of my company, that I actually can carve out a little bit more time for my why, which in most cases it's family time, maybe travel, vacation, maybe continued education, or maybe even just sitting on your patio enjoying the sunsets, right? Whatever that looks like, sometimes when you look at your corporate careers and you put some guardrails on it, you might actually be hitting your why. So this client went through the first phase of, okay, I don't want to work here, maybe I want to do my own thing, to wait, maybe this is a good fit. So then you look at the third quarter that we worked together, it's like, not only is this a good fit, but now that I'm crystal clear on what my why is and what I can do within the company constraints, I'm actually hitting a home run and I'm becoming happier and the workflow is getting easier and the processes are getting easier. And guess what happens in that scenario? And I would venture to guess, Jim, you've probably seen a little bit of this. All of a sudden, you become a top level executive because you're in full stride in personal life. And that's what shows up to work every day. You're not looking out the window for something different. And you're giving 100% productivity because you realize that your why is being hit all day, every day, because you've identified it, you've put some guardrails on your business career, and you've also allowed yourself the freedom to go do the things that are important with you, which could just be sports with the kids. And so to kind of close out the loop on this client, by the fourth quarter of the year, the company was offering a major promotion to this person. And now in 2025, this person's in a new position with the guardrails in place, in charge of more people, but the happiness of hitting the Y with a complete home run, right? And the opportunity to slightly dabble in some of those entrepreneurial ventures, like speaking for different corporations, short-term consulting that they got permission from their company to be able to do in their off time, right? So you take all that and combine it together, and you've got a really happy individual as an entrepreneur with some entrepreneurial highlights, but most importantly, hitting their why. And I think it's pretty exciting to see that happen because a lot of times we get wrapped up in wanting to do something else because the grass is greener. But if we really evaluated, through the foundational steps we talk about in here and doing the homework on what your why is, what your goals look like, what does your personal goals look like, your business goals, and how do you start to achieve those and chip away at it? Next thing you know, you can be in the perfect spot. And I had to tell this person, I said, look, you're showing up, you're glowing, you're happy, everything's in order. I said, get used to it. And they're like, really? I said, yeah, get used to it because this is where you're at now. And as long as you're focused on the things that you've worked on for a complete year, you're going to enjoy those benefits for the duration of your career and beyond. Right. And so it's been really, really exciting to watch that transpire in this individual. And I want nothing more for anybody else in this group to find that if they're an entrepreneur, right? And so, Jim, I'm looking at you tonight because I know you've made some decisions to go into that corporate life. And as you explained before I hit the record button, you doubling down on your business because of the success, which is really exciting. And what I've seen you transition through is that similar to the story I just gave with this other client, is that you found happiness within your why, what you're doing, and what appears to be a lot of enjoyment in this position that you're in right now. And obviously, you get to still enjoy sports and the family and doing all those other things, right? And so I'm equally excited to see how that progresses for you because sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to go do what we think is what everybody else is doing, and they must be having more fun than me. Might not be the case, right? And that just goes right back to the why. So, Rod, do you want to weigh in on that a little bit? Because we've touched on this a little bit in some of our podcasts, but I think it's important to really understand what that looks like.
I think you're right, Jim. And Jim, Mr. Spilson, because I've got two Jims here. I I just want to commend you for staying in that entrepreneur lane because it can be so satisfying and rewarding. Everybody always wants to be able to do that jump, and be their own boss. And yeah, there's a lure to that, but you've heard Jim and I talk about it all the time. It's hard work, and there's a lot of different stressors. But I was thinking, there you can get so much satisfaction out of being the best you, the best version of you in a different environment. That might be where you where you're supposed to be, to bring other to mentor other people in the entrepreneur environment. And I was just thinking about my own career, but I was always an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur, right? I had always side hustles going, but I took a side gig. It was as a part-time job, and they were looking for a little marketing consultant at a healthcare facility. And I went in there and they gave me, it was a real specific little niche. And I had three people that I was responsible for, and they asked me to do a couple of different things. But when I started doing those, I saw needs elsewhere. And I just sort of expanded. And within a year's time, I took over the accounting department, the web department, the front desk, membership, and all of a sudden I had, 26 employees and a supervisory position that I didn't want or need, but it just grew because I was needed and I was providing a service that the corporation needed. And so there's value in that. I didn't stay there. I mean, it was one of those things. I did what I needed to do and then I moved on. And there's so much satisfaction in being the best version of yourself where you are, and not to be allured and pulled away from that because of the next shiny object, right? Well, I could do this and I could do that. Yeah, you can, but it's okay also to be comfortable where you are. And too many people, I think, lose sight of that. It's you're not missing out. As long as, like Jim said, if you've got your why handled in your personal life, and you're getting what you need, you're not in a toxic work environment, or you don't like your job. I'm not saying that. Don't stay in a bad situation. But if you're in a good situation, boy, just be appreciative and grateful and outperform everyone else. There's so much satisfaction in that. So I'm proud of you for coming in and staying with us this whole time as an entrepreneur. You're a shining light and a great example of how you can straddle that fence and do it. It's motivational for me to see that, having come from that area. So pat yourself on the back for that, and just keep pushing ahead, because man, there's so much more, especially if you've already doubled. Now double it again.
And by the way,
Always stretch.
just for an anchor point on this discussion, anybody that came in later listens, Jim wasn't coming out looking for advice or for us to weigh in on his current professional career. But as I suggested, seeing his face reminded me of a client that I'd worked with and continue to work with, as well as what Jim's story's been. And I do, to Rod's point, I do think it's exciting that you've kind of made some dabbling in an entrepreneurial sort of way, but yet you found a lot of success in the corporate world. And what appears to me, you found a lot of happiness within that process and seen some things that you like or don't like. I think, and this is what I'm encouraging my other client to do now, is to take everything that's been learned in the last year about the why and the guardrails and kind of the process and what it really means to be that complete value to a company, is take all that and now apply that and help your team under you or alongside of you to become that same version of themselves, right? Because what's better than you showing up 100%, all encompassing, but when your colleagues start showing up in the same manner, then you guys are building each other up in a way that you can't beat that. And it's one of the things that I was able to enjoy at two of my career stops. One was at In-N-Out Burger, and the other one was at Kettle One Vodka. And I'd worked at other corporate places too, but with both those companies, they took very, very good care of their employees. They gave them a lot of autonomy with schedules. Financial benefits were huge, as well as vacation time and the ability to have some guardrails for yourself, not only personally, but professionally. And what that did in both those companies, and they're both still around, very successful, is that they've built teams of people that build each other up. And, if you know anything about quick service food, i.e. In-N-Out, there's nobody that even compares to doing what they do on a large scale. Yes, there's bigger fast food restaurants, but there's nobody that has consistently year after year had the success that they have. And that comes from that formula, that perfect formula, taking care of people, giving them the tools to know what their why is, to foster family and growth and all those other things. So it's pretty exciting to see how that all unfolds. So I would ask that anybody that's listening really consider what that means to be a true entrepreneur, giving 100% of yourself to the time that you're on the clock and that what the company's asking you to do, and find your excitement and your why within all of that. It makes for a pretty neat environment. I outgrew In and Out, and Kettle One sold. Otherwise, I probably would still be at Kettle One if they didn't sell. So there's tons of ways to make all that turn into happiness. So good deal. All right. So just as a recap too, as Rod suggested earlier, he's got a special guest coming on in March, Alex Weber. We are working on we are inviting people to be guest speakers on our calls. And that could be anybody that is a member or in our community, or anybody that is outside of our network as leadership to bring value to this group. If you've got any recommendations or requests, no, Anthony, I'm not going to ask Rob to speak in the group. We have a common friend. But we're happy to reach out and have people collaborate and bring additional value to the crew here. What we try to do is stretch ourselves by adding some additional values to what we're doing within the group, so that we're constantly growing and giving you a little bit more to work with. We may, and we've talked a lot about this, is switch up our call times. It's becoming really kind of a burden for a couple of us. Rod, thank you for your consistent, unwavering ability to be available on Monday nights. It's becoming very challenging for me based on a community service I do every other Monday, and for Rachel based on private life and everything that she's trying to do. So we may switch up what our call times are. However, I also want to take this time to remind people all the resources, as Rod already alluded to. We've got a back end of library of books that are recommendations for you to read and further your knowledge in business. We also have a lot of tools back there. And I would say even some of those tools, Jim, might even be good for entrepreneurs, things that will help bring value to your company. Or another way to look at that, since we're talking about entrepreneurs, is if you're tasked with something, gosh, where do I start with that, right? Maybe it's something that is either in the back end already, or something that any one of the three of us have at our fingertips. Matter of fact, we're coming out with, in the next, I would say, week at this point, a brand guide. And that's basically how to build a brand from scratch, what that looks like: Pantone colors, voice, messaging, etc. And you can basically follow that template. And sometimes as an entrepreneur or working for somebody else, you might create a new division or create a new product. And it's like, well, how do we develop the brand? Oh, let me bring my brand guide in to the process, right? And you can come with that tool. Typically, a company would charge a lot of money to help walk through that process, and it's just a resource that we have. Another thing, and Anthony's on the call tonight, is utilizing us for resources outside the calls. And maybe you're working through something and you're just not quite sure, or you want to run something past us because you want a second set of eyes or opinion. To me, that's probably the best value of your community membership with Yes, is getting some one-on-one time to work through whatever's on your plate, for however long that looks like, and just say, hey, I'm trying to get through this, right? So Anthony called me earlier today on a new business idea, and we walked through it. Happens to be something that I'm in the process of working on. So, we had a few minutes to collaborate on some ideas. But I think that that's probably the biggest value, because if you look at it this way, you get to tap into an external CEO, CFO, CMO for, however much time you probably need during a month, between a few calls between any one of us. And that's pretty rare. I do know that other coaching groups, you don't get to do that. So I would dig in on that. So, all right. Here's where we're at. I would highly recommend that you listen to the podcast. Rod and I have been after the recordings again the last month and a half. So there's a lot of good stuff on there. Jump back in on that. I've got some fun new guests that I've been interviewing too, just in business. So there's that. And then there's going to be some additional recordings that will be more of a specific focus on a topic that you can add that into your education repertoire, which Rachel's going to record later tonight because well, she got stuck being a mom driving. So we're going to give her that grace, and I think that tonight's topic was perfect. So Rod, anything you want to add or any questions from Jim or Anthony, and we'll wrap this up.
No, I just think if you're not tapping into what we've already got, and especially I didn't think about this really from an entrepreneurial standpoint. I'm reading the Eighth Habit. I don't know if you've read Covey's the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, but it's the Eighth Habit, and he really talks a lot about the entrepreneurial focus, where you are and how you can develop, because you just don't go to the top with that stuff. There's a chain of command. And this whole conversation and that kind of gets into all of that. But you still need to be armed, right? You don't just go into stuff, shooting blanks and firing at shadows. So being focused is so important, and there's so much you can learn and glean from the back end and some of those documents. And even if you're not setting up a business, just to look at them and be familiar with what is involved. And it's like Jim said, if you're starting a new division, or you're adding a new product line, or you want to go after new clients, or you want to expand, all of these things matter. And it's all it is it's arming you. It's like getting a PhD on the side, right? So if you're not taking advantage of that stuff, that's really on you. But dive in there and get it done.
Yeah, good job. You got something for us, Jim?
The only thing I had was to remind Rod, I sent you a LinkedIn request today.
You did.
Otherwise we weren't connected.
Well, we should get connected. I'll have to jump on there. I didn't get a notice for that, but I will jump on. I'm a techno peasant. Thanks for that, Jim.
Sure.
Right on. All right, Anthony, you're on tonight. You got anything for us?
Not necessarily. Just wanted to say hi to everyone. See how everyone's doing. Glad to see Jim. You're in here. Glad to see you too, Rod.
Nice to
Jim,
see you, Anthony.
I know he spoke earlier today.
Yep. And so my expectation is that you look at the foundational elements to start that new business, if that's what you're going to do. So, business plan, mission, vision, values, all that good stuff. And obviously you're starting to dabble a little bit. So good job. I'm not going to spill the beans tonight. You can spill them later when you've got a little bit of brand to it, but really good idea. Jim, by the way, it's all about collaboration. Anthony is selling his tune-up business. All right. Good money at a good price. So if you know anybody in that general market, your guys' side of the world, hit up Anthony and talk about maybe a referral or something like that. But we built out the valuation of his company and everything that backs that up, as well as the opportunity there. And the opportunity within that business is massive. So put it on your thinking cap. Instant revenue, by the way. So
Anthony's only like 30 minutes from me.
There you go. Right. So almost in your backyard. Maybe between the two of you guys might know somebody that might be interested in buying that thing or what have you. So, okay. Look, everybody have an awesome week. Check out the podcast. If you like the podcast, share it. We'd appreciate that. We want to keep growing it. And if you got any suggested topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. And again, Jim, really good to see your face and hear about what's happening in your company, buddy. Always good to see you.
I'll always keep in touch. Thanks, guys.
All right, talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Great night to you.